G'day, folks. It's a coach here, and we are talking all things Ogor Mawtribes. I have a special guest, a man who, might need some introductions. I asked him what social media is. He's like, none. I'm like, how do you make my life a little bit harder? But he has street cred and significant street cred because he went 5-0 at the Las Vegas Open with the Ogor Mawtribes. Partially, I want to say that I could see it happening. But for most parts, when I saw it happening, I was relatively surprised. When I looked at the top 8, Russ, I was like, right, yep, cool. Living City's doing well. Soulblight's doing well. Where's the Lumineth? How did Soulblight Zombies get in there? And then little old you, I think, came in at 5th or 6th. There was something around like you were 5-0. I'm like, how on earth did Stonehorns go 5-0 undefeated at the Las Vegas Open, a 200-odd player event? So first off, my introduction is Russ Tanner. I mentioned earlier he's already gone 5-0, but more importantly, you went to the knockout finals, which is the top 8, which was incredible. But also you are a mad lad with the gaming crew Guts and Gits, or Gits and Guts. I like to say Gits first because they had the better faction out of the Guts.
Yep, that's true.
Everyone knows I'm an insane Moon Clan grot fanatic, waiting for my day that the goblins are great again.
You and me both. That was my 2020 army.
What a day. But Russ, hello, welcome. Let you talk for a second. G'day, welcome.
Yeah, thanks, man. Thanks for having me. I appreciate being here.
So we're going to talk ogres, right? For the people who are joining us. And we're going to talk a little bit about your hero's journey. But more importantly, I want to kind of get into your head because, look, ogres are in a good position right now. Like, we're definitely in this hero hammer elite style of game right now where people are save stacking, people are doing mortal wounds, people are doing monsters, like the odds are stacked up in your favor. But not a lot of people are talking about ogres. It's certainly not at the top of the top 5 that most people would kind of talk about. If you say who's going to do really well in a tournament, ogres are probably mid. And I don't know if people have dropped playing with ogres and they've gone to something else, or it's just under people's radar. But when I looked at your list, I thought it was rock solid. So I want to kind of understand why you chose them. What did we learn along the way? And what are the lessons for the people who love their ogres that they can kind of take away for their next GT and their next events? And maybe when I looked at some of your lists, man, you got some pretty crack ideas, some things that I didn't expect in your list.
Yeah, thanks. It was fun to put together. The Beastclaw Raiders were my first love in Age of Sigmar, so it was when they got the new book and they kind of got a little bit of bite back. It was pretty exciting to jump back into them for a minute.
Did you play with them in fantasy, or did you start with the ogres in Age of Sigmar?
Just in Age of Sigmar. I didn't play much fantasy, so
They're one of the fantasy factions that I never really got into. I didn't get a lot of chance to play against them, but I know a lot of fans right now are super excited about them being in Total War as well. So it's like gut buster central right now. People are trying to convince me to play with Noblars. I'm like, no. If I'm going to play Noblars, I'll play with Gits.
yeah, yep, for sure.
So what got you into, maybe first off, like what was the LVO like for anyone who hasn't attended a major event or hasn't gone specifically to the LVO? How was your overall like tournament experience? Like, games aside, like what was it like?
Yeah, it's amazing. I've been going since 2015, very regularly. Started with 40K, made the transition over to the much smarter game a couple of years ago. But just great people there to have a good time, drink some drinks, and enjoy not only the gaming side of it, but also everything that Vegas has to offer as far as great restaurants, great food. You've got lots of places to just hang out with your buddies that you don't get to see. You make these friends, whether it's online, whether it's whether it's at different tournaments around the state, around the country, wherever you're going. You get together all in one place, and you get to see and meet and talk and just have a great time. No matter where in the stack rank you end up falling, I've never gone and regretted it because it's always just such a good time.
And by the way, I'll shout out Gout here, who's mentioning that you have an incredible looking man cave there. So I'll have to get photos of it later or something, because that is the envy. I'm in a studio room that my wife has taken over during the week because she works from home. She's like, I need your stuff more than I do. So I'm like, I gotta, like, okay, wife. Just
I guess
happy wife, happy life.
that's right.
But
That's right.
but I think for me, like from a tournament perspective, and I share this because some people are probably getting into Age of Sigmar for the first time, especially like from a competitive point of view, and third edition might be their entry point to the game. And tournaments seem really scary, right? You know, they seem like something that people are like, "Whoa, I'm not ready to be beaten up by like these NPE crazy lists that just want to smash me in turn one." And you know, while certainly there'll be hard lists, you know, especially competing for the top, I think tournaments like LVO, Adepticon, CanCon, the Bobo in the UK, they're very much as much as a competitive event as well as a hangout with your buddies, meet with new people, have some drinks, go out, karaoke, like dinners, you know, just talk and chill. Obviously, LVO's got the casinos at the Vegas, so it looks like an incredible event, and I've already kind of said that I will definitely be attending. COVID restrictions aside, it looks like you got some mad people in the chat as well. I think they're the hero of the ogres right now. Which leads me to asking you, why the F did you take ogres to the LVO? Like, given the state of the meta, given that people are running around with Archaons and they're running around with Morathes and they're running around with 2-up armor saves and mortal wounds for days, like, why on earth would you take ogres?
That's a great question. It's my first love. It does a little bit of damage. I took them to a few local events and they did okay. And I thought, you know what, we'll go for it and we'll see what we can do.
Was it your first love and you were just going to do well with whatever you had, or were you already doing well and you kind of were confident that you could be competitive at the LVO?
This is a very similar list to a list that I took to LVO with COVID. It's like 2-3 years ago. One of the
Time means
first times
nothing.
one of the first times I went to Vegas, I took a list very similar to this, and I ended up doing fairly well. I'm comfortable with the play style of of the list, and I got to add a little bit of magic phase stuff this time around, which just made it that much more enjoyable to play, and having to think about every phase and being able to interact in every phase is something that I really wanted to be able to do. So specifically, that's why we went Bloodgullet instead of one of the others. If you're talking Boulderhead, I tried that a few times and it just didn't sit as well with me because yeah, you get the extra mount trait, but it just doesn't do enough to really push them across the line. And I think everybody's, when they're looking at it, they're focused on, beefing those big boys up. But really, there's a lot of other things to play with in the army.
Yeah, and that was kind of what surprised me as well, because when I was living vicariously through the LVO, so I was actually meant to be running a 100-player tournament the same weekend. Unfortunately, I had to cancel because of the rise of Omicron, and it just wasn't viable for me at the time. So I got to live vicariously through the LVO. And as I was watching your hero's journey, because I was literally like looking at every round, I was updating Twitter, like I was the voice of Twitter. I was sharing, like, I'm watching this list, and spoiler alert, folks, Russ ran Bloodgullet, which kind of threw me off as well, because you see more boulder head, you see, you talked about the extra mount traits, the mount traits and things like that. It kind of threw me off. And then when I kind of unpack your list a little further, there were things that I wasn't common seeing in third edition. A lot of people, and we will get into the list, folks. I want to get more into like the rationale and why Russ did what he did, as opposed to here's the list, justify it, and we will talk about it. But like you had a whole bunch of Yhetees. That really threw me off, because while I understand the value of Yhetees and people taking like one Yeti, most people are taking like, yeah, Stonehorns, they're taking Mournfang Cavalry, they might be taking like the Icebrow Hunter with Ice Sabers. You might have the Underworld Warband, the guy with the Man Trapper and things like that. But there was some interesting list choices that kind of threw me off, at least for yourself. So kudos to you for some secret list tech in there.
Thanks, man. It was fun. It caught a lot of people. They didn't quite. I think that's one of the things that maybe helped me a little bit more is people didn't quite know how to deal with what they had in front of them.
And I think that's one of the cool things. Like I was talking to Gavin yesterday, who obviously won the LVO, and we were talking about going with off-meta lists. And, you know, do you have to follow the meta and do you have to run like the absolute optimum lists? And the answer is no, because you can still do well with, well, Beasts of Chaos. Now they've obviously got an update to White Dwarf, but like you can take Gits and Corn, and most people aren't used to certain aspects, or the 6-inch pile in from a Bloodthirster, or some of the crazy fanatic fight first shenanigans that people have forgotten about because they're not. People remember Lumineth, people remember Stormcast, people remember Marathi and her bow snakes, but what do I do with Yhetees? and like, what is all these pile-in shenanigans that you do? So
Yeah,
that's
it's lots of fun to have those conversations, and a lot of the opponents. It's you talked a little bit about people getting into into the hobby, into the organized play, and being a little bit afraid to do that. But I would just strongly encourage you to get out there and do it, because it's only going to make you learn. And if you talk to your opponent and ask them questions and talk list tech with your opponent across the board, it just helps strengthen that relationship, and it makes the next 2.5 3 hours that you're sitting across the table from them more enjoyable.
Yeah, I was saying yesterday, and I've said it many times, that those first 5 minutes of meeting a player is so important to set the etiquette, to get to know them, so you can build rapport and conversation and have a laugh. And when the dice go poorly for yourself, have a laugh. When something goes really hot for your opponent, I congratulate them often. Sometimes I might go, but it's always in jest, and it's a bit of fun as opposed to getting frustrated. And again, it's a shared experience. So I couldn't agree more, which probably leads me to, who did you face? Was there a particular lists that you fought, and were you expecting to fight them? I guess, what were you anticipating from like a meta perspective?
Yeah, I mean, going into it, uh, I listened to your discussion with Gavin, and he puts way more thought into it than I do. um, I was, I was worried there was going to be a lot of giants. I was worried there was going to be a lot of dragons. There were. Um, we don't have a really strong Daughters of Cain uh, force around here, and so I know that they're powerful. I don't really know what to expect when playing them, so I was a little bit nervous of some of those things. But as you're playing with with the person across the table from you, or as you go to events, you can't make a plan because you don't know what you're going to face, and there's a lot out there, and you just have to be ready to play your game, and to try and make it as enjoyable an experience for yourself as well as your opponent, to to kind of get through it, win or lose, and have a great time. So I wasn't, I wouldn't say that I was necessarily expecting um to face anything, but I knew that I'd be facing probably some dragons. I got a big. I had two living cities that I faced. I faced a big Wa player. It was a great experience. He had a very interesting list. It was just a jumble of everything from the Orc Codex. And then I played Seraphon. I played Ridge, and that was a very fun game, very enjoyable game to play against him. And then Night Haunt and Ideneth. So I feel like I got a really good breadth of the field to kind of enjoy my time and play new armies. So it was all over the place, I felt like.
How did you find your army responded to the armies? Because I guess, if I'm going to a tournament, I'm not thinking about how do I handle Nighthaunt. I'm not thinking how do I handle Big War, especially like Big War. I've yet to see a high performing Big War. Anyone who's a Big War fan will notice that it's absent on my channel. purely because I haven't seen it yet. And even Cruel Boys, like I've only ever seen shooting Cruel Boys do well. I'm yet to see a positive gut ripper build
Yeah.
Cruel Boy list. But if I'm going into LVO, I'm thinking that I'm going to fight bow snakes. I'm going to fight long strikes. I'm going to fight fulminators and dragons. I'm going to fight some hero hammer, whether it's Nagash, Archaon, Marathi. I could count the hero hammer that's kind of happening right now. They're the kind of things that I would expect, but it sounds like you had an interesting path, and maybe the meta is too vocal. People are like whinging about certain armies like Suns, or maybe it's not as bad as what people are expecting. I don't know if you have any thoughts or.
I definitely don't think it's as bad as people are talking about. That's one of the great things about Age of Sigmar is there is enough randomness in the game. There is enough that you don't see the hard stops like you see in the sister game. The field has, I mean, this year was very interesting because it seemed like it was kind of going that direction with so many dragons out there. Like there were more dragons. That was like the single most faction that I've ever seen at AOS. But I mean, you look at the top 8 and we had only one repeat of a faction in there, and all the rest were varied. And it's been like that every year. It's just that there's enough diversity out there in the field, and the game is such that if you're playing it well, regardless of the army you're playing, you have the potential to do good.
And that was part of our discussion yesterday with Gavin, is that you don't need to over worry about the meta. Like, how do I handle this? How do I handle that? I think the clarity comes down to how well do I know my own army?
Mm-hmm.
And then how do I respond? Because you're right, like you just don't know the run that you're going to get. I'm curious to know though, should you have faced, dragons or some of these other armies, like bow snakes, long strikes, some of the things that are the boogeyman right now in the meta, Suns. How do you think you would have went, if that would have happened? Obviously, opponent aside, a great opponent would obviously be a different, but like just from a faction point of view, how do you think you would have went?
Yeah, so there are some things that I do in my list to kind of try and mitigate some of that long range heavy hitting damage stuff. And so that the couple of times that I have played DOK, it's been I've been able to kind of mitigate some of that damage by getting them in close combat with things that aren't really that important, so that they can't snipe out the stuff that is going to hit and do hard until it can hit and do hard and be there. So the shooting didn't really scare me going into LVO. As far as the Gargants, I would have been nervous to play a Gargant player, honestly, because it takes 2 Stonehorns to maybe kill a dragon, and if he's got 3 other Gargants out there, it could be
And I can
tough.
tell you, as a Gargant player, I hate playing you. I truly hate as a Gargant player, and I'm actually playing Gargants in a couple of weeks with Kragnos. I hate playing your Ogre Mawtribes / Beast Claw Raiders, because you do everything better than me. You're faster than me. You're more durable than me. Some of my shenanigans, like being able to pull out banners and things, I can't do against you. Often you charge me. Obviously, Kragnos brings it a little bit different, but usually I find that I rarely get the charge into Stonehorns and Thunder Tusks. It's always you charging me, and then I lose some of my damage. So it's always kind of frustrated me. Like I've beaten you, but like it's a much harder game as a Gargant player when I'm up against a Stonehorn.
Yeah, well, that makes me feel a little better. I won't be so scared to face him next time.
I hate you
I just
so
go
much.
straight in right where I want.
Just because you've got more bodies than me, especially
Yeah.
like if you've got a couple of units like, Mournfang Cavalry, where, I've got to focus my attention on pulling the Stonehorn down. And then you're going around me with, Yhetees and bloody Icebrow Hunters and the little man-trapper dudes. And you got like, and like, there's only so many things I can handle. And unfortunately, mono on mono, I don't think it takes a lot of effort for a Mega Gargant to pull down a Stonehorn. I usually have to go double team just to pull it down. And then you're kind of wrapping around me doing other things. So, but I do want to quote this point, which is really interesting, because while we are going to heavily focus on the Beastclaw Raiders side of the Ogres, I'd be remiss to not talk about the other side, which is the Man-Eater side and the Dad Bods. And I'd love your perspective on where they are right now. And, I haven't seen a lot. Not a lot of people are playing them, and I don't know why. Is it the coherency issues? Is it they just don't have the mortal wound and the range output to handle some of these things? Like, what is it from your side of the fence?
Yeah, looking at the entire book, it, it's nice because there is a lot of options in there, but really the options that can get work done is kind of limited. I feel the dad bods, they just don't have enough bite. Like, they're gonna sit there and they're gonna take a hit, but they don't do much else, and they're really point. They're very expensive. They cost a lot of points. Biggest weakness in the book um, is a cheap battle line, cheap screen. There's nothing to really kind of protect what needs to be protected. So you have to be really smart with how you're deploying, how you're setting up, and how you're approaching the game. um, as far as the other ogres, man, I can't remember the shooty ogres.
Are the Iron Blasters? Is
Yeah,
it
I
the
have
Iron
a I have, I have
Blasters?
a good buddy who plays the kind of the Iron Blaster faction, and he does pretty well with them, with the big cannon guys, and then the guys that are running around with the cannons holding them. They shoot a little bit. They can punch pretty hard, but they don't do it overly well. They do it mediocre. Well, kind of middle of the road.
Yeah, like scrap launchers are okay. The Iron Blasters are decent in short range. I think that's probably my only issue, is that you don't have a lot of long range tools, and the ones that you do, like the scrap launchers, are just rubbish. I'm not a fan. Things like Noblars, I think, are a worthy screen if you're looking to protect yourself against, like, if Iron Jaws or really fast armies coming at you. You might want to go, Noblars to kind of screen, then you hit them if you're not being low drop. But yeah, I think at the moment, just your man eaters and some of the others, like the fire bellies, and just it feels like coherency, especially because you're not going to take a minimum unit of 3, right? You're going to take 5 or 10, and you don't have a lot of range. You don't have good attacks. So I think that's kind of why I'm better off. I feel right now, Mornfang Cav, your Stonehorns, your Thunder Tusks, and then sprinkle in with things like Butchers and, special things, as opposed to heavily investing in dad bods.
Yep, yep. Even Mornfang, for the output that they have, they've got a lot of wounds, but in my experience, they don't hit very hard, and they're pretty expensive. As 160 points for two of them.
Two.
That's a lot of points for not much.
But there's 6 wounds apiece, aren't they? They're 6 wounds.
They're pretty hefty. I can't remember off the top of my head.
I think they're 6 wounds, so they're quite tanky. They're a good little screen, because you tie somebody up for a while.
Yeah,
Um, you can't ignore them because they will tie you up and grind you down for a long time. So, um, yeah, I can see why the Beast Claw Raider side is definitely the stronger side right now. And look, that time may change. A white dwarf supplement, maybe, who knows? Maybe you'll get Ren 7 as well, like our Beast of Chaos, or maybe something comes up. But right now, I can see why you would go heavy Beast Claw.
or we leave the realm of beasts.
Well, that's not far coming. Like that, and the changing from the Gurish Heartlands into something else might completely change the game. Aaron wants Noblar Battle Line.
That would be beautiful.
See, I would actually partially disagree, because if you made them Battle Line, it's an easy broken ranks. But if they're not Battle Line, then you can use them as a screen and give away no battle tactics.
I have 9 Yhetees in my list. They're getting broken ranks no matter what. Like, that's never been a concern of mine.
So how did you build your list? Like, what was in your thinking about this LVO list? Because you've obviously done well previously going in, and you mentioned between major tournaments you wanted to get some magic into your list. What was some of your thinking based on either the strengths of the book and or what you were thinking you were going to lean into. You mentioned dragons, shooting mortal wounds, etc., etc.
Yeah. So when I approach the list, I just
The kitty cats is there.
there we go.
They are
There we
like if
go.
you're running like your Icebrow Hunter with some kitty cats, and yeah, that's an easy broken ranks target as well.
Yeah, and they don't give you much of a screen. They're not many. They're not very durable. But going into it, it's looking at what's fun in the book for me. I want to enjoy my game. There's nothing better than a charge from a Frostlord on Stonehorn. They hit so hard. They're fun. They're good in the book. And they move really well. They live forever, as many of my opponents cried very salty tears about not being able to take them down. But I look at what's fun. I wanted to get a couple of those in there. I love the idea of the Yhetees as the battle line, just because I think Mornfang are too expensive for what they do. Yhetees have better mobility. Yhetees are a little more underlooked, as far as across the table. If somebody sees Yhetees, they're like, not really that big a deal. But they've got, if you've got Mornfang, they're like, that's going to be a tar pit. That's gonna stop me. And so I really, to get everything that I wanted in the list, it kind of worked out the way it did. Rothgarn, he was MVP. Had to make sure to get him in the list. He just adds too much versatility. Through and through, he does a great job with his little man trappers. So
He's a jerk. Just on behalf of myself, I remember playing against a gentleman in my Martin Pask in my server, and he played with, and I was playing against that, and Marathi, he put it on arcane terrain near an objective, the little man trap, and I bloody walked onto it with Marathi to put a wound on her. I'm like, you're a dick. Like, I wanted the arcane terrain, but I also like,
yeah, yep. That trap. You put it out on the board and you tell your opponent what it does, and they say, "Wait, what does it do?" So
it's so
kind
good.
of,
Like,
yeah,
it's
surprise.
so good. Like, it's good to see some Underworlds warband doing well. I think it's probably count 5 on my hand some Underworlds that I'd actually bring into my list. That is definitely one. I think it's great. And just want to call out Bartek's comment as well. I actually haven't done the maths on this, but if gluttons are, if you double reinforce gluttons, and if you're saying what you're saying is true, and there's 750 points, that's insane. Like that, if that's true, like I can get a unit of 30 Phoenix Guard, which are more durable for half the price. Oh no, maybe not half the price, but close. Like I'd get better value from Phoenix Guard. That's insane.
Yeah, you could put Kragnos in your list. You could get 2 Frostlords on Stonehorns.
Kragnos, a unit of gluttons. Kragnos, a
Yeah.
unit of gluttons.
Yep.
How do you think Kragnos would actually go? Because I actually saw some Beastclaw Raider players doing like Kragnos with double Stonehorn to get the 3d6 charge to obviously do. Is it Metal Cruncher that does the
Yeah.
mortal wounds on the?
Yeah. It's not Metal Cruncher. It's a different one. But yeah, it's the
It's the
bulk.
mortal wounds, like you roll,
Yeah.
the charge roll is the amount of mortal wound dice
Yep.
that you roll, and
Yep.
but doing it on a 3d6 would just, it could be a massive mortal wounds on the charge before you've even done anything in combat.
Yeah, it could be huge. Again, I think for the list itself, I think Kragnos was a little too expensive to get two Stonehorns in there with him. That would be a completely different focus, and you're banking on that charge, and that's the only thing you're going to do. And if you don't do that, you're in trouble.
You say that because in a tournament coming up in 2 weeks, I'm running Kragnos, double Gatebreaker, and a little baby Gargan. I'm YOLOing it. I'm like,
I don't want to
and I
think
mean,
about this next event. I'm just going.
and I'm just yeeting up the board. What I would kill for some cheap screens. But like, I think Kragnos does add a lot to your army. But I think the challenge between you and I is that my megas are also my battle line, while your Frostlord on Stonehorns are not. If you were in the same position as I was, and let's say Frostlords on Stonehorn were, I reckon it'd be a viable build. I think you could do 3 Stonehorns and Kragnos under 2K, and
Yeah.
that would just be rock solid.
Yeah, it would. The Frostlord on top of that Stonehorn makes a huge difference because you can have Stonehorn as battle line, right? But
Yes.
there's so much more bite with that Frostlord on top. That I'm not a fan of the battle line. Just Stonehorn Beast Riders.
I've played against them and they're okay. Like they're decent.
Yeah.
And you're really taking them for the Stonehorn as opposed to what the rider is.
Hmm.
But yeah, like compared to like the gap between Frostlord versus what are they called? The beast,
Just the Beast
beast
Riders, the
riders.
Stonehorn
Yeah,
Beast
beast
Riders. Yeah.
riders. Big difference. Big difference on output and things like that. And we'll get to your list. You know what? Actually,
Yeah.
we're kind of dancing around it. What I might do instead is I might actually bring up the whoa, a little too early. I wanted to talk about Bloodgullet first.
Yeah.
All right, actually, folks, I will spoil Christmas. Here we go. Here's the list. Ready? Cool. We are going to talk about this list. So we'll talk a little bit about how we got to this point, and what did we learn, and if you had your time again for the LVO, would you have changed anything that might have made a difference? But we'll get to that. I want to kind of get into why on earth would you take Bloodgullet, and also did the Mawpot come in handy at all?
Yes, the Mawpot is amazing. I love it. I chuckle because I made two very critical errors in my game with Gavin. I mean, I was on my back foot. He's a stellar player, stellar opponent. It was a good game. Unfortunately, it was faster than I would have wanted it, but I put my Mawpot in the wrong spot, and it really choked me out. But before that, we lack good screens, so oftentimes I'm using my Mawpot as part of my screen, and so kind of trying to set it more toward the front, and it generally works very well to kind of hold up a big footprint on the board and let me kind of build my castle, if you will, around it, and then put my big monsters behind that to kind of get going.
What Soren in the chat has made a really interesting point, and I'd be curious to see what your thoughts are because, and I've seen this attitude from Beast Claw Raiders. Certainly, obviously, dad bods are like love my Mawpot. There's so many things I could use the Mawpot for, but always the challenge of your army is so fast running up the board that you lose the range of the Mawpot, and to refill it becomes quite difficult. And Soren had mentioned that he doesn't even own a Mawpot. So I guess the question for you is, is it a critical piece? Obviously, it's free, right? So
Mhm.
having it on the table, like you're crazy not to put it on the table, even if it's just to block certain parts of the board off, or just even if you get like turned one and you get a one cheeky heal and that's it. But what are your thoughts on like your side of the fence being Beast Claw Raiders and the Mawpot? Do you build around it? Is it important to your strategy, or is it just a nice to have?
No, I think it's key. It's very important. It's very strategic. It's kind of part of the secret sauce, right? Because yes, the Stonehorn, the Frost Lords, they're running up. The Yhetees, they're running up. People are away from the Mawpot, but I've got my Butcher and my Slaughtermaster. They're sitting back by the Mawpot, casting spells, buffing my guys, throwing out heals, and then I've got that heal that. The Beast Claw Raiders in the Bloodgullet. One of the reasons that I love Bloodgullet is because it can heal. Right, a Stonehorn is hard enough to kill by itself, but if you're healing back 3d3 wounds in a turn after they just got punched really hard, that's really valuable. So I love the Mawpot. It's super super important because it helps screen. It gives my Butcher, my Slaughtermaster, kind of a home base to be its mystical, so they get that +1 to cast. They're there, and more often than not, my game plan or my strategy is going to try and suck at least some of my opponent in close to my deployment zone, um, and have to deal with those butchers and the Mawpot there, and so it is refilling more than I initially thought it would when I put it on there.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, one of the common complaints that I hear from Beast Claw Raiders is that you find yourself outside of your Mawpot ranges often. But I think I also, like, when I look at your list versus other people's lists, I often don't see the Butcher in the Beast Claw Raiders. I don't see the
Yeah.
Slaughtermaster in Beast Claw Raiders. So I think most people just go full ham on Stonehorns, Thunder Tusks, Mournfang Riders, those types of troops, and don't kind of do a blend like you did. So it's an interesting point. But I do want to call out, did you say the Mawpot's mystical?
I think so, right?
If it is, it obviously it doesn't give you +1 to cast on spells, but it does give you a +1 to your prayers, which would be important to
Not mystical. I'm
your
sorry. It gives you +1 to
arcane.
cast and dispel. Yeah.
Cool. Okay. Yeah, I was
Yeah.
like, wait a second. I'm like, it's I didn't realize it was mystical, but no, it's not. So
Yeah, it's one to casting and dispelling.
Chorf, we will get to the list soon. We'll come back to the list properly. Like, I actually spoiled Christmas, but I want to get into Bloodgullet first. Then we'll talk through the list. So I guess what I want to understand before we get to that list is, what were the decisions from, first off, why Bloodgullet over the others? And then what was it within the faction that you wanted to start kind of building around? Because again, as I mentioned, you don't see Bloodgullet nearly as much with this type of build. You do see more of the other parts of the faction. And a lot of people in the chat agree with you. They love Bloodgullet. So what's the secret sauce here? And, is it the drop of the red stuff, Bloodbath, the Heralds of the Guppin God, Splatter Cleaver? What is it? What are you maximizing?
So I've got two butchers, the Slaughtermaster and the Butcher in there. So they get an extra spell from that Heralds of the Gulping Gods. So they get that extra spell, that extra cast. And that's fantastic, because the ogre book has some really good spells. And then, I mean, worst case scenario, you're throwing a arcane bolt or a mystic shield on one of your Stonehorns.
So they know an extra spell, but they can't cast an extra spell. Or they can cast an extra spell.
No, they can cast 2 spells every turn. Yeah, the Herald of the Gulping Gods.
Oh,
They
yeah.
know an
Sorry,
extra, and they can cast another.
Yeah, as I said it, I then looked at the second part where it says, in addition, friendly Bloodgullet butchers can attempt to cast 1 extra spell. So making it a double caster, knowing 2 spells. Hell, you could go, you could get an extra spell lore through, a War Scroll Battalion enhancement if you wanted even more flexibility.
Yep.
Did that flex kind of become important to you?
Yeah, yep. It's one of the parts that I really enjoy about the Mawtribes, just that ability to kind of have a lot of different choices in each of the phases of the game. You're playing in each of the phases of the game, and you've got a lot of options in there. Also, the Splatter Cleaver is amazing. Normally I'm keeping my big monsters pretty close together, and so you get in there and you try and attack with him last after everybody else has kind of attacked you and done a couple of wounds, and then you're just dropping a whole bunch of splatter all over your boys and healing them up. So that's really quite good. And then that nice drop of the red stuff. Also, there isn't anything in Bloodgullet that doesn't add value to the list and to how you're playing.
Yeah, I really like the nice drop of the red stuff, and when we get to the list, we'll actually kind of unpack this a little further. But I just want to call out what Bartik said. Actually, is a really good comment. So just to clarify, the Mawpot is not arcane, but should you happen to find yourself near arcane, you could potentially stack it. Now, obviously, you got to deploy the Mawpot 3 inches away from
Yeah.
terrain. So if you happen to have like a big based model, or you find some type of perfection, you could, actually even like you could potentially get a +2 through a combination. While if it was double arcane, it wouldn't stack, I don't think.
Right. Yeah, that is correct. It's not arcane. It just gives you that +1 to cast, +1 to dispel. The Butcher's base is big enough to where if you set him right in the middle, he's going to get both with that mystical and the other. It's big enough to do that.
So take note, folks. That could be a good deployment tactic. Put it, if you do see a piece of arcane terrain, and it does, obviously don't chase it, and put your Mawpot to the side of the board, and think smart. But if you happen to find yourself with a nice piece of arcane terrain near your deployment zone, have it next to or put the Mawpot next to the arcane terrain. Get yourself a nice little butcher with a big base, and you'll get +2 to the cast, which is a nice little boost. Good stack.
Yep, yep, it's fun.
Anything else you'd call out from Bloodgullet, and or would your type of list differ if you went with one of the other builds, like the other sub factions?
Yeah, yeah, for sure. If I went in a different direction with one of the other sub factions, Boulderhead I mentioned earlier, I played a little bit with Boulderhead lists. Um, I I didn't like that it was 100% combat phase. You're charging, and that's all. I feel like the extra mount trait doesn't add enough value to offset what you get with blood, with the blood gullet bonuses. Um, if I were to go that route, I don't think I would have the butcher and the slaughtermaster in the list, and I probably would go away from Yhetees as well.
Was there any types of armies that you were concerned to fight? Like, is there anything that like you don't do really well against?
I laugh
Other than
because
sons that you thought that you'd have problems with sons, and here you are hearing from me,
well,
Mr. Sons of Behemat from Warcom, and I did pretty well in second edition with them. But yeah, I hate you. I hate so much. Like I hate playing against Stonehorns. I just get piled in.
yeah, I laugh because the my club, I learned a lot of valuable lessons as I was practicing and getting ready for LVO, and I was beaten very handily by all of my friends that went down with me to Vegas. And so there's yeah, yeah, I struggle really hard. Iron Jaws sometimes, they just move so fast, they do so much damage, and they just keep attacking, and my Yetis die. So the Yetis die, and then the next squad of Yetis die, and then the next squad of Yetis die, and then his cabbage is eating my Stonehorn for dinner, and I haven't even. I'm just watching him kill all my stuff. So there are seeing armies that I've struggled with significantly.
Yeah, and definitely without a screen. I guess you could screen with Yetis, but then you're really just relying on a bunch of heroes. So
Yeah.
that'll be a tough grind. But for anyone who might be listening to the podcast, I'll just quickly read out the list, and then we can kind of unpack it a little bit. So you've got your Huskguard on Thunder Tusk. I do want to hear more about that because people have seemed to leave the Thunder Tusks at home. Most people are just putting more points in their Stonehorns, and they would rather run 3 Stonehorns than a Thunder Tusk. So I want to know where the value comes from. Anyway, you got your Huskguard and Thunder Tusk, which was the general with the nice stuff of the red stuff. You got your Blood Vulture, no surprise. You've also got the Skull Shards of Dragar, and you've got the Prayer of the Pulverizing Hailstorm. You got yourself 2 Frostlord on Stonehorns. Ignore the 12 inches. That's me being a potato, copying his list and then not removing it. Ignore that. 12 inches. Cool. No, it's just the movement. One of them has the Splatter Cleaver where you've got to take, and you've also got Metal Cruncher in there. The other one doesn't have an artifact or a mount trait. You got yourself a Butcher, which is the Tenderizer with the Bloodgullet Ribcracker spell, as well as the Molten Entrails. You got your Slaughtermaster with Ribcracker and Greasy Deluge. And you've got, what's his name? Rothgorn?
I say it's Rothgarn, but I have no idea.
Yeah, cool. We'll go Rothgorn. 3 units of 3 Yhetees. You've obviously got his homies, the Man Trappers. What surprised me, because a lot of people on the internet, if you take them by face value, are talking about the race to the bottom, that everything must be, battle regiment, get as low drop as possible. And you've gone, lol, 10 drop. You have rather put into Hunters and Warlord, which are the two core battalions. So 2K on the nose, so you're not going to touch your Triumph. And you've obviously gone Beastmaster, given you've got 3 tanky heroes.
If they're dead, I'm in trouble. Game's gone.
Yeah, and spoiler in the chat, Bartek in there saying pretty clever list to get the ridiculous pile in on the Yhetees. So we'll let Russ explain a bit more. That to Chalf's point, Ogre Soup, and it's nice to see Ogre Soup because you do often find that people are either going all Beast Claw or all Dad Bod. You don't really see the combination very often, and I think you've done it really well. But talk me through your decisions. What happened and why did you do it?
Thank you. Yeah. So there isn't anything in this list that I don't absolutely appreciate putting on the board and playing with. The Huskard, he makes the Yhetees battle line, so that's key number one. Is in order to get that battle line in there, I need the Huskard. I like the fact that he's a priest. I like the fact that he can kind of hang back a little bit and be a support character for my two Frost Lords. I like the fact that the pulverizing hailstorm, it can be pretty mean. You pick a point on the board 18 inches away, you cast your prayer. Anybody that's within 3 inches of that prayer on a 3-up takes D3 mortal wounds. So the Huskard, he just spits out mortal wounds, right? He's got the Blood Vulture as a shooting attack that he can pick a character 30 inches away, or pick anybody 30 inches away on a 2+. You're doing a mortal wound to them. Just little chip damage to kind of try and take out those little support characters, or those key pieces that kind of need to be taken down. And then the blast of frost wreath ice, I think is what it's called. It's 12 dice. You should be doing 2 mortal wounds on average with that, unless you're going up against a giant block of guys, which we're not seeing a ton right now in the game, but it is still 2 mortal wounds that you're spitting out. So potentially 3 mortal wounds with the Blood Vulture and the ice snowball.
Question to the teacher. Often you see Keening Gale pop up. Now, I know you don't have any Mournfang, so obviously you lose a little bit of that. But also, I was thinking probably, and maybe any sharp players here might be thinking this as well, is Call of the Blizzard. Given that you have so many focuses on the Yhetees, and the Calling of the Blizzard is casting value of 4, it's 18 inches, and you can bring back 1 Yhetee from the list, right? You got three different options here to bring back a Yhetee. Why would you not go Call of the Blizzard, and why is it Hailstorm better than Call of the Blizzard here?
I don't feel like the Yetis do enough damage to really do that. It might be something that's fun to play with. It's not something that I don't bank on the Yetis doing a whole lot other than grabbing objectives and being a screen to kind of try and eat charges or eat overwatches. So I don't put a lot of weight in them, and oftentimes, you've also got the 2 War Scroll prayers with the Huskard, and so oftentimes I'm finding that I need to do those. One of them is a heal D3, and one of them is +1 to wound rolls, +1 to wound or +1 to hit. I can't remember which, but so that's why I feel like he can be a better support character for the other guys, and try and do that chip damage, because you really struggle with that long range. And if I can get that pulverizing hailstorm down, and I can do D3 mortal wounds to 2 or 3 units, that adds up.
And by the way, I fully support your decision. But for someone who's sitting there going, well,
Yeah,
wait a second, Russ has gone and got Yetis. Why wouldn't he go Call of the Blizzard? I think building into Yetis, you're not going to get the same value. And I think when you combine Hailstorm as well as the Blood Vulture, to be able to kind of snipe off heroes, to chip wounds off, and having long range threat, I think is a good option. Keening Gale is nice, but I guess with your extra 3-inch shenanigans from Bloodgullet, you probably don't quite need it.
right. Yep. Yeah, and they're fast. Our movement is we're quick. We're getting where we need to be most of the time. And then
No, I dig it. And obviously your Huskard it still heals, right? Is it still heal, or that they remove that?
they did remove that.
Man, it was always something that was just annoying me. Like 2 stone horns are in my face. Then there's Jerkwad, Thunder Tusk is healing up. I'm like,
Oh no, yeah. He has a prayer that can heal D3, but he doesn't have the old heal.
no, but you can still heal, right? So it's a
Hmm.
good way to keep those Frost
Yeah.
Lords around.
Yep.
And now that the heroic action to heal, heroic recovery can't happen in combat, it's a good alternative.
Yeah. I cried a tear on that one.
Did that hurt you? Like, did you find that was a big impact to you
Yeah.
and
Oh,
your heroic action choice?
100%. 100%. If my stone horns are in combat, every turn I was heroic recovering, just because they are so hard to chip down, and if I can put D3 back on them every turn, that just makes them last that much longer. So that was a big kick.
Yeah, and your bravery is good enough that you are likely to get. Well, I mean, you were decent enough to be able to get a good heal.
Hmm.
Compared to, I guess, getting an extra CP can still be quite challenging. It's like a 50-50 chance maybe. So
Yeah, well, and
um,
your leadership's higher if you're in combat with somebody. Your leadership's +2.
true.
So
Ooh, so you're a 10, so you'd be healing, but unfortunately, yeah, that doesn't
I
work.
think it's 11, right?
Your
I
bravery
think
10. Oh, so that's a Huskard. I'm looking at the Huskard at the moment.
oh
Oh no,
yeah,
your
the Frost Lords are 9.
Your Frostlord's 9. So yeah, if you add +2 being in combat, then yeah, it's absolutely it's an 11. So you but yes, Bartik, to your I guess I'm calling out here that is a change you need to consider, which is why the Huskard being able to heal is a good consideration given that you now can't heal with a heroic recovery.
Yep. Yep.
Just calling it out. Yes, I know you can't do it now, but I want you to hear that, folks.
Yeah. And then we've got the 2 Frostlers on Stonehorn right there. I played a little bit with putting a mount trait on one and the artifact on the other, and I felt like stacking one all the way to the 9s was better bang for the buck. Can have one that kind of can be a little more risky with it, and another one that's just gonna mash stuff. That Metal Cruncher's sweet with the D6 mortals if somebody's got good armor against you. And then my butcher, my slaughtermaster. You just want me to go down the list, kind of talk
Yeah,
thoughts,
no,
or
I was just having a look to see why I couldn't remember what the skull shard of Dragar did,
oh
and
yeah, yeah.
I was just thinking to myself, why didn't he put an extra artifact on the Stonehorn, whether it is amulet? And I was just having a look at your artifact choices here, and I was just trying to see why wouldn't you go a second artifact on the Frost Lord?
So that those skull shards are there. I
There it
know
is. I found it.
it's
Yep. Once per
it's
battle,
funny.
in the bearer can attempt to unbind one spell in the enemy's hero phase, as if they were a wizard. If they do so, the spell is automatically unbound. So just no spell for you.
Yep, yep. And that's I mean it speaks for itself when there is such magic heavy lists out there. I mean, I think when I played Ridge, it stopped his comet, and so that just saved me a whole bunch of mortal wounds right out of the gate on the first turn, knocking me down. So I love the ability to just say, hand of dust, no thanks. Comet,
Mm.
no thanks. Mind Razor, no thanks.
And
A lot
there
of those.
always is that critical spell at that critical time. You don't do Mind Razor in the first turn. You couldn't care less. But when those bow snakes, sorry, the bow snakes, the combat snakes are coming up, the stalkers are coming up, or something is kind of really getting buffed up, or someone wants to use Bridge or Lachlan to kind of teleport their force up, you can just go no and completely shut down. Yes, Choff can shut down the magic and that utility, because I play the Knight Incantor in my cities build, and just having that once per game no spell for you can really change the dynamics, because a lot of people go through these cycles of buffing up their troops, getting ready to launch something at you, and just like, nah.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. Being able to throw off your opponent's entire game plan by just saying, "Not this turn, maybe next turn,"
Mm.
is valuable.
No, I dig it. Yeah, like Aaron's saying, "Sad Nagash sounds echo in the distance." Yeah, it was like, no hand of dust for you. Like, just like, and then you can smash him in the face with a stone horn or two.
Yeah.
No, that makes sense. I guess that was kind of like I would imagine you'd want to buff up 2 Frost Lords as opposed to your Huskard. But looking at that ability, yeah, that makes complete sense why you do that. If you were going to buff your Frost Lord, your second Stonehorn, is there an artifact that you like or would consider?
Yeah, you know, um, I've toyed. I don't know that there's another artifact that has really stood out that I've given a ton of thought to. Um,
I know, like your
the
two
the
universal ones, like obviously you could do Arcane Tome and
Yeah,
Flaming Weapon. You could be doing Venom Encrusted Weapon. Obviously, is a good artifact choice.
yeah, yeah. I've toyed with the idea of the arcane tome to kind of do the flaming weapon shenanigans there, but I just I'll keep it simple, keep it with what I'm used to, and go forward.
No, I'm not. I guess I'm thinking like some people might go, I really want to, or maybe they want to go double warlords. Maybe who knows? Who knows what people are doing? But you
Yeah.
got your butcher and you got your slaughtermaster. So why on earth would you bring in this ogre soup as opposed to sticking purely to BCR? This is where I really want to get into the meat and potatoes.
Yeah. So the butcher and slaughtermaster, I love those two guys. The spells, that rib cracker, -1 to an opponent's save, it's so money in the day and age of +12 to armor saves. It's really important to get that rend in there. And then the molten entrails, that's just a nice little buff to put on one of my stone horns to make their mount weapons do an extra damage. So you go from a 4 damage to a 5 damage with your big horns. And then that greasy deluge. Let's see that one. I've got all my notes so I don't forget anything. That one, an enemy within 18 inches is -1 to hit. Right? If they're not hitting my stone horns, that I love the -1 to hit on the Huskard. That's just the Huskard has a -1 to hit, so it gives him a little more survivability there. The -1 to hit, putting that on a stone horn, especially if he's in a big block of guys that have just massive attacks, going from hitting on 4s to hitting on 5s, it really cuts that damage down.
Something that I want to call out with the butcher as well that I love, because I love psychological warfare. I'm someone that likes to psych their opponent out, not from my mean muscles, but my brain. And the spell on the butcher, the native spell, I love
Yes.
because people do when something has a potential, they always think worst case. Because I play Gits, right? Like, people would ask me like, how much damage does a fanatic do? I go, look, they could roll literally nothing and they could do 30 damage. Now they're like, they hear 30, like, oh my gosh, I can't do 30. Well, no, it's swingy. And when you look at the is it Vicarious Maw,
Yeah.
there's the potential to just do D3 mortals, because you obviously roll a dice at the end, and on a 4-up, you get to do it again. And you could literally pull, I don't know if you've ever had any success stories with it, but it's the psychological, I must stop this spell, because if you happen to roll a couple of sequences of 4-ups, 3 wounds apiece, you could pop that hero in the backfield, that critical hero. You could really do some serious damage to that super buff 2-up armor save hero. What have you found with that Maw spell?
That's always the last one. I always save that for last just to make the opponent wait a little bit on it.
So they let the other spells through. They because they want to stop that one, right? They'll let other ones sneak through. I love that.
Yeah, but it's always fun to have that, that tense moment of casting that spell, picking the prime target, and then rolling those dice and having a laugh with your opponent. Oh yeah, too bad it didn't. Most of the time you get D3 mortals and that's about it. But when you do get a couple of rolls in there, it's fun, and it adds for some laughs.
Do you have a story? Like, what's your best one that you've done?
So, man, not off the top of my head. I did. I think I when I played Nate Trentinelli, I got it off. I believe, if I'm remembering correctly, I got it off on Nagash, and it went a couple of rounds to put some wounds on him, and that was one of the key parts to kind of bring him down a couple of tiers when he got up in my lines, because he's pretty mean in combat right now. That was something I learned very hard when I played against him.
Maybe I'll do the YouTube thing at this point and say, guys and girls, if you have done this, tell me in the comment section what's the best thing you've pulled down. I know, like my Goblin Fanatics, right? My 5 Fanatics in 1 turn pulled down Alariel. I won the double turn, and then they killed down Durthu and 6. I think they pulled like 4 or 5 out of 6 Kurnoth hunters who failed their stomp. And like they just went like this murder rampage for 140 points. And I have seen the foot of Gork, I think, killed Nagash. It just like kept coming down and kind of killed Nagash. But I want to hear a good vicious Maw or Vicarious Maw story. So chat, let me know. I'm curious.
Yeah, I'm not that lucky. I guess they say better be lucky than good. or my memory's not that great. But another really fun thing to do with these guys that goes in with the realm of Gur is the metamorphosis spell. So I'm trying to play a little bit back. I'm trying to get my opponent to 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 kind of come at me and have a power base that they need to come at, and being able to put that metamorphosis on the butcher or the slaughter master to either take an objective, because they become 10 model count on an objective, or to get that charge. So eh, it's a really kind of good kind of tech thing to do with these two guys, because people see them back and they're like, oh, casters, they're not going to do much, but really they can punch pretty hard if if you get that metamorphosis off, you get a charge. The um the Stonehorn has the bellowing voice, which lets you re-roll your charges. So if I'm outside of 3 and I get under a 7, I'm going to re-roll that to try and get you know hopefully more than 7. So
And it's some cool abilities like the blood gruel that lets you heal if you
mhm,
successfully unbind. I love the Great Cauldron as well.
yes.
Obviously, do you find? I know I do want to come back to a question in the chat. That's a really good question. Just to loop back to the Skull Shard for a second. Do you find, just to close off the Slaughtermaster, do you find that your Slaughtermaster is sitting at the back with the Mawpot? Do you find it middle of the board trying to support everything? Or are you finding the Slaughtermaster is chasing your big boys?
Yeah, he's definitely not chasing the big boys. The pot that he's dragging around is too random to put him out there like that. I'm keeping him close to that Mawpot so that the opponent is going to come and try and kill him. Going to come and try and get him, and then that's kind of, I keep them kind of tag team together to kind of try and deal with anything that comes into my backfield.
Yeah, it's a good call because the butcher probably alone. I used to play with the Slaughtermaster as an ally, in some random lists, and I was always impressed with the Slaughtermaster. But yeah, that pot is always super random, and I just kept pulling out bad meat, which would kill me.
Yeah, when you need it the most, that's when you pull it out. Is that bad meat when you need to heal?
Always the case. But Swordhaven in the chat made a really interesting comment that I think I'd love to hear your thoughts, because obviously it's arbitrary, right? But the person is asking around when is a good time to pull out the skull shard artifact, because I can imagine there are people who are worried about pulling it out too soon, people who hold it and kind of lose the opportunity at the right time. So obviously, every game is going to be different, but what are some of the good reasons that you might want to notice in the game, or, when would you consider it?
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, because there have been times where I'm at turn 5 and I'm like, I haven't used it. I haven't and then it's just a wasted artifact. But really what I'm looking for is I'm going to look for something that's going to make a big impact on the game. We talked about the bridge. If somebody's buffing up a unit to just yeet it across the board and through that bridge, I'm going to stop the bridge after they buff that unit all up, and then it's a wasted magic phase. Again, I'm going to wait for the key spell that is either going to hurt me really bad or really kind of turn off their game plan. Spell portals, that's a really important one. If you're playing the Sylvaneth flute player guy, you turn off the spell portals and all of his mortal wounds that he's throwing out to everybody, that's delayed a turn at minimum. You've got, Hand and Gash coming through those spell portals. You can turn those spell portals off. So I'm looking I'm looking for the thing that's either going to impact me significantly, and I'm going to stop it. And generally speaking, I'm not gonna hold it for a long time, because the Husker, being a big guy, -1 to hit, a lot of wounds, he can go down pretty easy. So I'm not holding on to it, or I'm trying not to hold on to it for too long. I'm going to look for something that's going to hurt me, or something that's going to throw off their game plan for at least one turn, and that's the point of it.
Yeah, it's probably, it's very hard, right? Because there's some armies that want to get something to you turn one. You mentioned bridge, for example, portal's another one. Is it something that a Auric player is going to want to do before launching their force forward? I would probably say on average, turn 2 to turn 3 is probably where I'm probably most looking for it. I can only speak on behalf of my Knight in Cantor, so very similar rule. That once per game total unbind. The other consideration as well is often when someone's preparing for like a double turn, or if someone takes the bottom of the turn and there's a critical spell that they're happy to kind of keep on should they lose, or you might be more comfortable giving away the turn priority so you can get a double turn later on. I think it just depends. Like, there's those critical spells, Mind Razor on Marathi, for example, is a perfect example. Or if there's a Hand of Gork teleport, if there's going to be, you often can see there's a couple of spells. Hand of Nagash is another one. There's a lot of spells that people, protection of Techless. So they're probably the ones that I'd look for. It's turn 2, turn 3, though, because they're obviously the critical pieces. And when people are trying to score the battle tactics, and depending on how combat might go, you can start to rack up or fall behind the VPs.
Yeah. Yep. And it's crucial. I mean, I'm 10 drops in this army. And so talking about BPs and grabbing those, I'm trying to grab, I'm counting on being forced to take the first turn, and I'm going to try and jump up on BPs quick with this list, try and get as many as I can right out of the gate.
If you are given first turn, given that you don't get to choose that, are you going for like is it aggressive expansion, the 3 monster run within 3?
Yeah. Yep.
Is that the one that you would go for?
Always. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's just they force me to have the first turn. I'm not going to give them anything to play with on their turn. Maybe in that case, I'm throwing the man trappers out on a flank to grab an objective. I'm throwing one squad of Yhetees, over here to grab another objective, and I'm going to try and put bodies on all the objectives that I can so that I can score the most points in that first turn, but not commit anything in that first turn, because something that has been a hard lesson for me to learn is to remember that the game is 5 turns, and if you're tabled in turn 2 or tabled in turn 3, it really, that first turn didn't matter. Play a little patience.
And obviously having 3 monsters and not having to rely on metamorphosis helps get you the bonus VP. So it already puts your opponent on the back foot. Do you aggressively move forward? So if you do run, your Stonehorns and Thunder Tusks, do you move that full 12 inches plus the run roll, or do you just like slightly nudge forward? Like,
I'm just slightly nudging forward. I'm just kind of rearranging, and then I'm going to watch for what my opponent does. I'm going to try and stay out of range of those long strides of those bow snakes. I'm going to try and stay out of range with my heavy hitters until I can actually get in and do something to them. So that's kind of the strategy there, is not overly committing with that, missile across the board.
And that was probably what I wanted to call out from you, because the temptation would be, cool, okay, I've got to run, so I'm going to move my full 12 plus my run roll. People often could get too aggressive with that movement, and then they fall out of that 3-inch coherency to score the bonus, the VP. But just slightly nudging them forward means that you might still stay within range of unbinds, and you can keep, especially like your bow snakes, which only have a range of 24, you can still stay out of range of bow snakes. I mean, Lumineth's different story with 30 inches and ignoring line of sight, but your long strikes and your bow snakes, at least you can kind of keep outside of 24, so there's not a big threat against you, but you've racked up some big VP.
Yeah, and the more turns that you can go, the more battle tactics that you can get that give you an extra point for having a monster. So this particular iteration of the General's Handbook, with all of the monsters getting all of these bonuses, really plays into kind of the list that I've got here, because I'm trying to get 3 victory points with every battle tactic instead of 2.
And you got to remember as well, you're giving away a victory point when you lose a monster.
Oh, they don't die.
Well, you just got to keep that in mind, right? So, like, again, if you can hold back and deny your opponent 1 less shooting attack, for example, that could be 1 turn that you've denied them from killing, a monster. So keep that in mind.
That's a key with the metamorphosis with the butcher and the slaughtermaster as well, right? You make them a monster,
Yes.
they can go down pretty easy.
Correct. So if you do it on like a low wound characteristic, you could give away a cheap VP on a butcher or a slaughtermaster. So keep that one in mind. But anything else you'd mention with the butcher and the slaughtermaster, or let's go into Hothgorn.
Yeah, we can go into Rothgarn. Yeah, he's
Yeah.
I love it. The three separate units for the 170 points. I'm almost always putting Rothgarn and the cat in reserve. Um, Depending on who I'm playing and what I'm playing and what I'm facing off against, those three little man trappers, they can be a great speed bump to try and protect. If you've got somebody that's coming at you hot and heavy, they can be a pretty good speed bump to slow things down. Or you throw them, way over on another objective if you've got your castle over here, and then they've got to be like, well, if I don't want him to keep getting that victory point over there for holding that objective, so I have to commit something over to kill those three Noblars, and it's just it's 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 they're fun to play with. They add a lot of thinking into how you're approaching the game.
Great for scoring a battle tactic as well, coming from
Yep.
reserve in your opponent's territory, and then having 2 units, because there are 3 units available, right? So you could do 2 of the 3 in your opponent's backfield. It's hard to screen out a couple of models, and you've scored a battle tactic while majority of your force is in the center, scoring, killing, doing its thing. So I always love that versatility on its own.
Yeah. Yep. And Rothgarn's always going to come in with the cat, like they always are coming in together, and so you're always going to get that battle tactic. I can't remember what it's called, but
Yeah.
being in the opponent's territory, they're also great because they are two different units. They're great for getting into the bows. They're great for getting into those big scary shooty units, because first you charge with the cat, he gets mowed down with the overwatch, or they don't waste the overwatch on it and he just gets in with them, and then you're charging Rothgorn in, and now all of a sudden they're not shooting something that's going to be doing some damage. And against a shooting unit, generally they're not
Yeah.
close combat efficient, and so he's very survivable in there. And with it being 2 units, they're having to split their attacks, and you're just barely tagging them, so they're not getting a ton of attacks. So they're really a menace in an opponent's backfield that they have to deal with.
And that is a great call out, because there is more and more long range shooting, whether you're talking about your cruel boy bows, you're talking about your daughters, you're talking about your sentinels, you're talking about your long strikes. There's a lot more iron drakes, or even like there's a lot of shooting out there. Having a cheap throwaway unit that you can tie up, unleash hell, then your frost lord or your thunder tusk can charge in, or even your yetis can charge in.
Mhm.
At least then means that your crappy part of a free unit soaks up that damage.
Yep. And by the time they kill him, your Stonehorns are there.
Yes, plus you haven't given away broken ranks, so it can't be
Mhm.
chosen. You've probably scored some points from having 2 units in your opponent's backfield, so it's only upside with this unit. I think if I was an ogre player, this would always be an auto include. There's very few reasons I would not have this. Like even just being able to like put a trap on arcane terrain as well. Like every wizard wants to sit on arcane terrain, or every priest wants to sit on mystical terrain. Put a trap on it and start chipping away at some of these heroes. Then you go throw your blood vulture, your hailstorm, and remove some of those squishy heroes as well. So it's just upside.
Yeah, that rule, for anybody that isn't familiar, when you set the man trappers up in the first hero phase, I should say, you put a trap token on one piece of terrain on the board. I think it has to be outside of your enemy's deployment zone, but
Yeah.
it adds a little bit of, again, making your opponent say, "Oh crap, this big piece of terrain in the center of the board. If I get too close to it, I'm going to take D6 mortal wounds, one time."
Yeah, and again, like we're talking those squishy 5 wound heroes. Like you're not going to, especially in the backfield, right? You want something that can project power. You're not going to have like your supercasters, sitting in the back. They want to be in the middle of things, right? So the D3 mortal wounds ties in perfectly to take away those 5-wound heroes. And again, a blood vulture or two, and you've popped the 5-wound hero that had a critical spell that they really needed. So again, only upside.
Yep, they weren't the spell that they weren't able to get off the first turn or the second turn because you skull sharded it.
And then the poor bastards do a miscast that when they actually they soak up the damage and then they miscast and kill themselves, which I've seen Marathi do, where she takes her first wound or her last wound from a from that kind of miscast. But so you got your Underworld's Warband, great Underworld's Warband. Talk to me about these Yhetees, because there's some shenanigans here between Bloodgullet and the Yhetees that I think most people are not seeing, or at least your opponent will underestimate.
Yeah, so the Yetis, they're fast. Their regular move is 9 inches, but if they're within, I can't remember if it's 12 or 18, but if they are wholly within 12 or 18 of that Huskered,
The friendly units, the drop of the
well,
nice stuff.
so not the drop of the nice stuff. It's
Oh.
the Huskered ability. They can run and charge. So they're quick, and then they've got the nice drop of the red stuff in there as well that allows them to pile in an additional 3 inches. Yetis have the good pile in to where they can pile in 6 inches, or they can activate to pile in if they're within that 6 inches. So really, you can potentially get a 9-inch pile in when you're without even having to charge.
Is that on the Huskard on Thundertusk?
Yes.
Do you know what the rule's called? Is that the Winter?
I got it right.
Yeah,
Here.
it's all good.
I think it's Winter's.
I'm seeing a lot of 18 inches between Blasted the Frost Wreath, your Blizzard Speakers. Like they're all 18 inches.
No, it's not the Blizzard Speaker. Oh, it's a Yeti specific rule. I'm sorry. Know your army, Tanner.
I'm looking at the Huskard. I'm like, where is this rule?
It's wholly within 16 of a Thunder Tusk. They can run and charge. So that's a Yeti specific rule.
Okay, so that's on the Yetis. So okay, this is another interesting point. I said right at the start with the list, why would I go with Thunder Tusk as opposed to another Stonehorn? And here's another example of the synergy where by having the keyword Thunder Tusk, it would allow you to run and charge. Why is that important?
Again, eating Overwatch, stopping shooting from shooting your the stuff that you don't want to be shot, getting into your enemy's backfield, grabbing those objectives when they're. Oftentimes, I'll find that the Yetis, I have one Yeti left, and he's just kind of hightailing it out of there to grab objectives or to. But yeah, so they're very mobile. I like them for that, and with all out attack, they can do a little bit of damage. They're 3 attacks. They hit on 4s, wound on 3s, -1 with 2 damage. So if I have the opportunity, I'm gonna give them all out attack and attack. They don't have a sergeant or a commander in the unit, so they can't cast it on themselves, which is kind of a bummer. But oftentimes that's kind of icing on the cake if they're able to do some attack.
Plus, what's great is they also naturally cause a -1 to hit against them as well, so they're going to potentially take a little bit less damage. Mm-hmm. But talk to me about the pile-in shenanigans here. So you got your Bloodgullet rule, which allows you to do an extra 3-inch pile-in when you're wholly within 12 of the general. Mm-hmm. Then you have a separate rule. So you've got the Bounding Leap, which the unit is eligible to fight in the combat if it's within 6 inches, as opposed to 3 inches. It can then move an extra 3 inches when it's piling in. So there's 2 separate rules, all interacting with the pile-in. How does Bloodgullet and the Yeti rules come together, and what are you doing to take advantage of it?
This may be somewhere that I could play a little bit more with it, but I'm really not trying to get my Huskered too close. We're way far across the board, and the Huskered, you kind of have to protect him a little bit. He's gonna come in and do a charge kind of toward the end of the game, but I try and keep him close to the stone horn, so that nice drop of the red stuff is letting them pile in that additional 3 inches. As far as the Yetis go, I haven't really found, I haven't had any like game changing moments to where I'm like, I need a 9 inch pile in. They're within 12, and I'm piling in 9 inches, or they're within 12 of the Huskered. That's a lot of check boxes that have to be ticked before it to actually activate, before it can actually activate.
Because your Yetis can't come in from reserve, can they?
Correct. They cannot.
So because I'm thinking like when you do like the Icebrow Hunter,
Hmm.
can he bring Yetis with him?
No, cats.
No,
Just
it's only cats. Cool. So it's not like you could do that combination, then you come in on the side of the board, you're 9 inches away from the enemy, then you can pile in and not rely on the
No,
charge. So that's not available.
no, no.
You've got no teleports.
Mm-mm. No.
So you can't take advantage of the teleport being outside of 9, pile in 9. So really, you've got two options. You've obviously got the run and charge, so you can slingshot yourself up in to your opponent, maybe soak up the Unleash Hell, get into something juicy. I guess what you're thinking about, a lot of it is around the pile-in targets, right? So you wouldn't have to charge. So if you were going to charge into bow snakes, lumineth, archers, anything that shoots,
Mm-hmm.
you can avoid Unleash Hell because you're piling in outside of 9.
Yeah.
And right now, Unleash Hell got changed, so it's now a 6-inch, not a 9-inch,
Mm-hmm.
which then means you can avoid Unleash Hell with Yetis.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of any other. I mean, and
Yeah.
obviously, you can get a better pile into something more juicy as opposed to tying into something crappy that you don't really want to be in combat. Are they probably your use cases?
Yeah. Yeah. So that's something that is that I definitely have used. Right. They activate. They pile into the shooty unit. There's no Overwatch, and then that shooty unit just can't kill them with their -1 to hit. So that's, I mean, there's definitely some play there, and that's they are versatile with how quick they are, and how much they move all over the board. I really haven't capitalized on that 9 inches because I just don't. I I don't find them close enough to the Huskered with that 12-inch bubble to give them that benefit.
What I'm hearing is the 6 inches is enough.
Hmm.
If in worst case scenario you needed to be more aggressive with the Thunder Tusk, it's a possibility.
Yes.
But you're not building a strategy around the 9 inches. It's just nice to have. The 6 inches, especially with the run and charge, is probably enough, right? You can
Yes.
run, you can charge, and even if you don't charge or you fail the charge, if you're within 6 inches, you can then still pile in despite failing the charge. So
Hmm.
you've almost got like a fail back, and maybe there's the reason right there. Maybe it is a fallback on getting into combat should you fail the charge, and it means you don't have to spend the CP to get into combat.
Yeah. Yeah. That's, yeah. That could definitely find some play in there. Hmm.
Yeah, cool. No, I'm just trying to connect the dots. Like, how do we make the most of it? And I guess it's a situational thing. It's not like, cool, I teleport, then I'm 9, I pile in. But one thing that you mentioned before we went live, which I think is worth calling out, is that your 3 units of the Yetis are sitting under hunters.
Hmm.
So why have you gone hunters as opposed to, I don't know, trying to build in a battle reg, going into some type of like commanding entourage or something?
Yeah, that's a great question. I didn't go into the battle regiment because with all those monsters, I'm not getting below like 4 drops, and so if you're not 1 or 2, you might as well be 10. And so hunters really helps the Yetis. uh, So they're not getting those monstrous abilities on them. The stomp really hurts them. I love to keep them around with inspiring presence if I can, because their leadership is pretty low. I think it's a 6.
Yeah, it's
And
only
then
6.
yeah, so you lose 1, and that's a pretty big deal, and if you lose 2, you're in trouble. um but also, when those monsters stomp them, uh, that D3 mortal wounds hurts the Yetis quite a bit.
Yeah, because they've got a pretty trash armor save. They've got a 6-up armor save. You're not going to spend all that defense on them to get them down to a 5, and then Ren brings them back to a 6 or a nothing.
Yeah.
4 wounds each. So yeah, I could, you could almost like essentially lose a Yeti almost immediately. So, and you've only got 3 in a unit.
Mhm.
Would you ever reinforce a unit of Yetis?
Um,
I know the answer to this
there's
question,
no points.
but if you could, like hypothetically, someone's thinking like, yeah, I want to go Yetis. I want to go all Yetis. I'm a mad lad. Would you?
Uh, no, I wouldn't. If
Because
if I had the points in the army and I could get 6 and fit them in, then yes, I could see that being viable. But to build a complete strategy around the Yetis, that would be a hard sell for me because they die pretty quick. They don't have enough damage output to really make a difference in the game. They're going to be ticky tacky here and there. They're going to kill a battle line. They're going to do a little bit of something, but there's not enough meat on that bone to really make it worthwhile to invest a lot of points into them.
and they have 1 inch. The reason I would solely never reinforce Yetis
Y-
is because they have a 1 inch range. That's the sole reason.
Yeah,
Unlike Doom Bulls, where I'm building in redundancy and I'm happy to run a unit of 6, despite the pile-in issues, so the coherency issues, it's that 1 inch inconsistent damage, poor rend, that I'm like, I'm better off just having more of them if I wanted to, or have some flexibility, than getting units of 6. Like, it's just not worth it.
yeah, yeah. With the coherency, you're only attacking with 3 of them at most because they're on 50 mil bases, so they've got a pretty
Hitting on
big base.
4s, wounding on
Yeah,
3s, rend 1 for 2 damage. So no, I'm not building around that.
yeah,
But
yep.
I think it's a good, interesting unit, and I like that you're able to find a different alternative. And by the way, folks, for anyone who's interested, this is not about Russ's ultimate list. It doesn't make you automatically a 5-0 player at your next tournament. It's not saying that Mornfang are trash and Ice Catsy are trash, or any other Uh, Beast Lord on Thunder Tusk is trash. It's merely something that you found that's really worked, and obviously take what you want out of this conversation. If nothing more, I love some of your thinking around the butchers and the slaughtermaster. I love that you brought a different perspective with the Thunder Tusk, the Huskard on Thunder Tusk, and I think with the heroic actions changing, having the heal is I think it's worth considering. If you're doing 3 Stonehorns, maybe go 2 Stonehorns with a Thunder with a Thunder Tusk as well. Off the back of LVO, would you change this list for your next GT, or is there something that you thought would work better, or maybe something that surprised you that you want to build around more?
Well, I was very surprised to be where I was on day 3. Uh, as far as the list goes, I'm very comfortable with the list. I think that I had a lot of practice leading up to LVO with this list, and I know it, and I'm very comfortable with it. So I don't think that I would change anything if they made Nobblars. If they made Nobblar's battle line, I might switch out one of the Yeti units for a Nobblar unit, um, just to get a better screen in there. And they're getting broken ranks from me, whether it's with 20 Nobblars or whether it's with 3 Yetis.
Pretty Yetis.
They're getting it. So I would love if they could do that. I would definitely change that. But that's as far as the book as it sits right now. I like where it's at.
What? So there's a lot of passionate people that love Noblars. I don't get it.
I don't
I,
either.
I, I don't I don't I don't know if they're memeing me, or like there's legitimately some secret source in the Noblars, and like I look at the War Scroll and it's trash. It's on
Uh-huh.
5s, wounds on 5s. It's a bunch of bodies. Yeah, I can add +1 to my attack characteristic if there's 10 or more, and if it, I don't. Are people just memeing me, or is there some source that maybe they need? Here you go. Even like in the chat, like Noblars rise up. Like,
Yeah, they would if I were to put them in the list, they would have to be battle line, and that's solely so that I can protect the meat of my army.
yeah,
That's gonna actually do something. Eh, There, I find this list struggles with protecting the meat, and sometimes getting somebody sneak in through the backside, and that's hard. If I had 20 bodies on the board, I could screen a little better there.
Challenge as well is because they're not battle line options. It means you can't double reinforce them. I remember seeing a couple of lists in second edition where it'd be a 60 block of Noblars, but you can only do 40 right now. So maybe in the next box we've had Fury of the Deep. Maybe we need like another version of the ogre book, and maybe there's a Noblar hero that rises up and makes them battle line and get 60 Noblars in the list, and they can be the Aldi version of Gloomspite Gits.
Yeah.
Yep, I know what I said.
Yeah.
Shots
Yeah.
fired.
Yeah. But
Yes, I know they've got traps, but I think taking Noblars is the trap. So just like let me put it out there. They are the trap. I got one more burning question before we wrap this up. And I'm sure obviously I could ask you a million questions, Russ, but from a deployment point of view, I think, there's a lot of talk around deployment, and I think a lot of people struggle with making effective deployment choices. How do you deploy? And obviously battle plan, an opponent, and there's a lot of considerations, but do you deploy on the line? Do you deploy defensively? Do you spread out? Do you castle up? Like, is there any rough considerations or advice that you would give the average ogre player when it comes to deployment?
yeah, for sure. When I first started the BCR, playing the BCR, it was on the line, fast as I can, right into the opponent, and do as much damage as I can. As I've kind of learned and grown and played more with them, I find myself trying to be much more defensive and picking my battles smarter. So I'm going to set up my Mawpot where it's set up. I'm going to set up my butcher where it's set up, and we're in the day and age of race to the bottom of drops, right? So hopefully before I put anything meaningful on the board, aside from where my castle's going to be with my Mawpot, my opponent has shown his hand, and I'm able to
Mm.
kind of reply to what he does. Whether I'm, 3, 4 drops, I've got the butcher, I've got Rothgarn that can go into reserve, I've got the slaughter master that can go down, and then I've got a Yeti squad that can go down. And by that time, most opponents are 100% on the board, and so I can kind of dictate where I'm going to go. So I try and respond to what they're doing, while also giving myself as much protection as I can with the Yeti bodies, the man trapper bodies in front of my butcher, my slaughter master, and my 3 monsters.
And because you are so high drop, yeah, you can put down some things you don't quite need to worry about. And you're right, like you can also see their deployment to kind of get an idea of often you can read your opponent pretty easily to go, right, they're going to give me first turn, or they're going really aggressive and they're going to take first turn. You can kind of see what they're thinking and you can deploy. And what I have loved about doing Suns, and I imagine, you in the same with the type of models that you're running, that if someone leaves a flank exposed or not nearly strong enough, you can take advantage of like a Stonehorn coming down, and then all of a sudden it can change their, like, well, I was going to give away first turn, but now I'm worried about you crushing into this side of the board and getting into my juicy wizard wagon or something. So now I need to take the first turn just to kind of reorganize my deployment and my troops, and then you force their hand a little bit. So that's probably why I've always enjoyed going things like Warlord and Hunters. And even in previous editions, I never went really battalions. One, because the ones in my armies were trash. But two, I'm pretty okay actually, not being told if I'm going. Being told if I go first or second, because I'm comfortable responding and I like being able to counter deploy. So
Yeah, I'm with you 100%. I appreciate that aspect of the game, and being able to try and get into my opponent's head and understand what they're trying to do and what they're trying to accomplish, on their side of the board.
And you keep your Stonehorns on the side as well, right? They're like the last thing you deploy, and they're like, where are they going to put it, right? And I'm like, I don't know if you're like me, but I'm a jerk because I'll also like fake measure. I'm like, oh yeah, cool, and like I'll measure up, and like I'll measure the opponent, I'll measure the objective, and I'll just be psyching them out. And like I clearly know where I'm going to put it, but like just going to mess with them a little because then you throw them off a little bit, like, oh, okay, now I need to protect here, I need to protect here, I need to protect here. And the reality is you can't protect everything. So you get the opportunity to pick the weak spot. So
Yeah. Yep. It's always fun to watch them sweat where you're going to put your big guys.
yeah, I love it. That's why I can't wait to run Kragnos with double gate breaker. Like screen that.
Yeah, good luck.
Any final advice you give my ogre friends? Because I think you have been a ray of sunshine that we haven't seen a lot of really good ogres in the tops of tournaments. Obviously, you do well, but people aren't nearly talking about enough. And I guess as people are looking at their kits, my ogre players that I know are super passionate. They love their ogres. My Discord gets flooded with bloody ogre memes and like these stupid total war gifts, and like they just love their army. But I think your performance has shown that it's not just about flooding the board with big monsters. You can go a bit of a soup. You can bring back a couple of models. I'd love to see more firebellies. Love that firebelly model. I think those types of just man eater type heroes just need more table love.
Yeah. Yep. I'd love to see them get a little bit of updates so they're worth putting in the list. I'll say that.
What's your dream? Like if there's a white dwarf that comes your way, or the next Battle Tome update. We know Destro's not getting an update for a long time now, but if ogres were to get a white dwarf supplement, what would you want out of them to help?
You know,
Other than Noblar's battle line.
I was going to troll you with that one. Not much rise up.
Noblar hero comes free with white dwarf at the front. They used to do like the Necrons and like a slaughter priest is like a free Noblar hero for every white dwarf subscriber. Now I'm going to get flooded with comments like, yeah, I want a Noblar hero.
Yeah. I love the man-eater models. I love the idea of these big fat ogres that just kind of wander everywhere and kind of pick up tricks from wherever they're at. I would love to see them get a little bit of an update, get a little bit of love, see them on the board. I was looking at them a little bit to see if they had any play, but they just, again, a lot of the book just lacks the bite that it needs for the points it costs.
I'm going to say something controversial here. With Total War 3 coming out and Greasius Goldtooth returning, I'd love to see Made to Order bring back Greasius Goldtooth, the big fat dude being pulled by his Noblar chariots.
Yeah.
I'll give him some rules, give him like a Glutos style of like buff wagon, and make it legit rules. Don't let's like Made to Order Legends. Like let's actually bring it back, because I think that's probably my one challenge with the dad bod side of this book is you have no durable hero. You don't have a big 10 wound commanding style hero, and you're often relying on smaller troops, or you're going to the Beast Claw Raiders side, and there's just no synergy between dad bods and the beast side. So some type of like Glutos style Greasius Goldtooth. I know. Like I'm gonna create like a petition now. There'll be like a GoFundMe to Games Workshop, but I would love that type of model.
I'd love to see a new kit. Like don't make a Legends. Just give us a new kit. That'd be sweet.
I was trying to be realistic. Noblar Heroes, your new kit. This is your hero.
Yeah, thanks. Yeti,
free on the white
new
dwarf.
Yeti models. New Yeti models would be like if I could get anything. My wish list would be decent Yeti models.
I tell you what, I'd love to see as well. Like now we're wish listing. That Rothgorn, the Icebrow, the kitty cat. I love that sculpt. I'd love to see more of them. And I'm not going to buy this Underworld's Warband just for one kitty cat to replicate across my army. I'd love a kit of just those kitty cats, because compared to like this box weird anime style resin kit, like no, thank you. So do that, folks.
Yep. You those are all my wish list items. You got them.
All right, I'm Santa Claus. All right, we'll make it happen. Russ, are you anywhere on social media that can point people to if they want to chat to you? Are you in like the Facebook group of like the Ogres and anywhere?
I'm a Russ Waugh is my Facebook gaming presence. I'm part of the Ogor Mawtribes Facebook page. I'm not super active in the social media realm, but I'm there. You can reach out to me.
All right. So if people want to talk more, Russ is on the Facebook group, Facebook Ogor Mawtribes, and you'll find Russ and a lot of great talk. It's a good group. I'm a member. I've been there for a long time. I'm not an ogre player, but you got a great culture and people just love their ogres. I think that's probably one thing I've noticed. Like Gits players, you're just super passionate about your army, even when they're trash. I remember watching Howe Twitch, like he just persisted with ogres were at their absolute worst. You just stick with them and you reap the rewards later and you just have fun with your monster trucks.
Yep. Wait till that pendulum swings, because it always swings in this game.
And then they come and charge you in the face with Metal Cruncher and all the other things. But I'm going to wrap up. Russ, you've been an absolute legend. Congratulations again on your 5-0. What's the next tournament? Like, where can I track your next success?
Oh, let's see. Next weekend there's an RTT down in Salt Lake, so I think I'm going to head over to that, and I think I'm going to take my dad bods. I'm going to take my Beast Claw Raiders down there again, because that's what I'm comfortable with right now.
Awesome. Well, I hope to see you next year at the LVO, because it is an absolute, as long as the Omnicron 7 point whatever million version we get,
we'll see you in Vegas. So we'll see you in Vegas. See you. Yeah.
Just treat me well. Be nice to your Aussie friend.
Yeah, will do. Thanks for having me, Coach. This was a lot of fun. Appreciate it.
You're absolute legend. And thank you everyone for joining the chat. And don't forget to comment in the comment section, what is the best thing that your butcher has done with that spell? I want to hear stories about how you killed, I don't know, obviously you can't kill Morathi, but tell me about how you killed Archaon. Tell me how you killed about the whole bunch of Phoenix Guard. Tell me about the stories you killed the Maw Crusher. I want to hear what you've killed with that butcher spell, because it is good when it swings your way. All right.
Yep.
Bye now. Thanks for sticking around until the end. I hope you found that video interesting and you walked away with a few new ideas. If you did, I would appreciate it if you hit like on the video, as well as left me a comment. Let me know what your thoughts are in the comment section below. The conversation will continue over on Discord, so links down below in the episode description if you want to join the Discord and continue the Age of Sigmar conversation. I want to give a massive shout out as well to these absolute bloody legends, these champions who have continued to support me through Patreon or YouTube members. That is going directly into supporting the maintenance and the growth of this channel. So thank you very much, guys. Much appreciated. And until next time, roll more sixes.